right, welcome back everybody. If this is your first time on the channel, welcome to Notes to Fret, where we are all about turning theory into riffs. And in this video, we are going to be doing something a little bit different. We are going to be providing a supplemental to a video that I put out just a couple of days ago. So if you haven't seen the video already on the modes, how they relate to the circle of fifths, please go back and check that one out. Again, I want to make sure that everybody's getting the most out of their time. This is a supplemental to that video. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive right into the circle of fifths to understand a little bit more about exactly what is going on there. And the reason that I'm putting this together is because I've gotten some questions that I may have missed something in the previous video where not everyone is understanding this fully. And I don't want anybody to be confused with this stuff, right? I want everybody to really kind of grasp this. So, this supplemental is absolutely covering whatever it is that I missed in the previous one. And I think it will help a lot of people out. So, taking a look at the circle of fifths over on the right, when I am looking at the circle of fifths for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all the diminished chords that we're not going to really be talking about for now. And I'm going to kind of cover up the section of the circle of fifths that we're not going to be really looking at. And the reason that I'm doing this isn't to hide anything. It's just to hopefully clarify our conversation just a little bit better for you. So here, what I am doing when I am looking at determining the neighboring keys and where the flats and the sharps come in and how they relate to modes and all that kind of craziness, whatever, here's kind of the thought process. What I'm going to do is I'm going to initially start with a given key. In this case, I'm just going to say C major. Now, this works identically for the relative minor, in this case, A minor, right? No real difference there. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and take a look at, in this case, I'm just going to look at the major key, right? So C major. Okay. And the most important thought process that I have right now is understanding the scale. I'm not hyper worried about the chords. Let's take a look at that. So here, when we look at the circle of fifths, we've got this D minor, A minor, C major, F major, G. I don't care about that. All that I'm looking at really is to the left. I'm looking at the scale, okay? Now, I can construct any one of these chords from the scale, whether it's A minor or E minor or F major, it doesn't matter. I can construct it from the scale. So my hyper focus right now is on the scale, right? The quality of each degree in the scale. Is the first a sharp or a flat? Is the second a sharp or a flat? Is the third a sharp or a flat? Don't care about the chords at all, which is why I'm not remotely worried about whether or not B is diminished. Because diminished is a chord, B is a note, right? B is B. So I am hyper focused on the scale right now, in spite of the fact that I'm starting to look at the circle of fifths, which is very much focused on chords, right? So I need to understand the relationship on how chords are built from the scale. Fair enough, right? It's a struggle that a lot of us go through when we were first starting to look at music theory. Lord knows I did. I struggled with this stuff a lot. But right now, the hyper focus is on the scale, right? The degrees of the scale. And all that I do from here is I decide to look at my neighboring key. I'm not going to go, and C to G is just a perfect fifth. I'm not going to look at C to A sharp or C to F sharp. I'm just looking at the neighboring one. I just want to see because the neighbors are so close, right? It's almost like they're the same, but there's a little nuance, right? And so what I need to do is discover what that nuance is between C major and its neighboring fifth, in this case G, right? Let's find out what the nuance is. So as I look at G, I want to go ahead and just kind of explore that a little bit. Again, I don't care that F sharp is a diminished chord because I'm not interested in chords. I'm only interested in whether or not in the scale, one of the degrees is either raised or flattened. That's all that I'm interested in right now. So here down at the bottom, we can see that we have the G major scale. We have something pretty close to the G major scale. So I have to ask myself, what's the difference between the C major scale at the top and the G major scale at the bottom, right? Well, clearly that F sharp comes into play. And I say, okay, that's very interesting. I'm not worried about, I'm not concerned at all whether or not F sharp is a diminished chord because I'm not interested in chords. I'm only interested in the degrees of the scale, right? And the degrees of the scale are notes, right? So B diminished is a chord. B diminished is a note, right? You can either sharpen it or flatten it, that's fine. But B diminished is a chord. So we're not worried about chords right now, right? And so here I go, okay, I looked at that. I explored my neighbor up to the fifth, right? C to G is perfect fifth. But I have another neighbor. In this case, it's F major, right? That's the corresponding neighbor to C major. And I say, okay, well, I need to explore that as well. And so even though it's a fourth, right? C to F is fourth. I still want to explore the key. And here, you know, a lot of the mindset will go, okay, well, previously I looked at F sharp and that was this diminished thing, so I need to focus in on E. No, not at all. And the reason being is because what we are asking ourselves, the question that we are truly asking ourselves is not about the chords, right? E may be a diminished chord, but E in and of itself is still E, right? There's no sharp or flat to it. So we're asking ourselves, what is the difference in the scale as to whether or not I have a raised or flattened note somewhere in the scale? So here, what we're going to do, obviously we have that B flat, but we're going to explore where that really comes from. When we look at the F major scale, well, not only is the B flat as far as a chord, but realistically, we have a flattened fourth, right? So the difference between the C major and G major as far as the scale is concerned is we have a raised seventh. Okay, fair enough. Mildly interesting, but cool. And the difference between C major and its corresponding neighbor, which is a perfect fourth away, the only real difference in the scale, not the chords, the scale, is the B flat. Okay, now, you know, now we have some information about our neighboring, right, our neighboring chords or neighboring keys, if you will, my bad. Now we've got this B flat and this F sharp. Those are really the distinguishing differences in our scale between C major and its neighbors. Whether it's F major or G major, the neighboring keys have this B flat and F sharp. That's kind of the only difference as far as the scale degree is necessarily concerned, because again, we're not focusing in on chords. We can construct chords hyper easily from these scales. In fact, that's how we construct chords, is from the scales. So let's pay attention to the scales and, you know, relate them to the chords later on. And by the way, with A minor, right? If you're looking at this, it's identical. Yeah, the only difference is you go from A minor up a perfect fifth to E minor, you know, a fourth down to D minor. But you still wind up with the exact same scale as far as raised or lowered degrees in the scale, right? So, you know, with D minor, everything's going to align, but you would have a B flat. Okay. With E minor, everything's going to align, but you'll have an F sharp. So there's no real, it's the same exact thing, right? It's just the order of the notes might be a little bit different. So now, when we come over to this table at the top, again, we compare major modes to major modes. And at the bottom, we compare minor modes to minor modes. And again, I am not interested in chords, so I'm not interested in diminished at this point, because I'm looking at the degrees of the scale. Now keep in mind that when you're comparing major to major, if you're going to compare Ionian to Mixolydian, for example, you compare C Ionian to C Mixolydian. Same thing down at the bottom. It's no different. If you're going to compare Aeolian to Phrygian, which is awesome, but you have to compare C Aeolian to C Phrygian, right? You don't want to move that goalpost like we spoke about in the last video. So now that you kind of see this, right, and you understand a little bit more about what the mindset is about going about understanding where these deltas are between the neighboring keys, you understand that the neighboring key in G major from C major has an F sharp, and the neighboring key F major from C major has a B flat. That's, as far as the scale is concerned, that's the only thing that we really necessarily need to concern ourselves for the time being. And let's go ahead and kind of take a look back. And these are some of the graphics that I put out a couple days ago. So there's a lot of overlap here. But now that you've kind of seen the thought process, let's go ahead and reevaluate these once again. And hopefully this will clarify a lot of the concepts from the previous video. So here, when we talk about Lydian, when we talk about comparing C Ionian to C Lydian, the only thing that we need to do is raise the fourth. And that means make it sharp, right? So the C is our first, D is our second, E is our third, F is our fourth. And, well, F is our fourth, and so therefore we sharpen it. That gives us an F sharp, right? And so there we have it, right? It's showing us. It's, you know, I think from my previous video that I wasn't able to clarify for everybody is it's not about F sharp being a diminished chord or not. It's really more about the F sharp being the raised fourth of the scale, right? We're not focusing on chord quality, major, minor, whatever. We're just focusing on the value of the scale degree, right? Raised or flattened. And so if we look at Mixolydian, once again, right, we look at that, and I'm just going to, again, fade out the sharp on the F. And we say, okay, well, we need to flatten the seventh. Fair enough, right? So C is our first, D is our second, E is our third, F is our fourth, G is our fifth, A is our sixth, and B is our seventh, right? And so we've got that flattened seventh. And so now, you know, when we look at that, we can start to see these relationships, right? And that's where we can go, okay, well, that's Lydian and that's Mixolydian, right? And it's only because the very first questions that we asked ourselves were, what's the difference in the degrees of the scale rather than the chord quality, right? I think a lot of people focus on the chord quality. What's the difference in the degree of the scale that gives us F sharp or B flat? And it's no different, right? If we go ahead and we just go ahead and take a look at the minor, it's the exact same thing, right? No question about it. In this case, we're just looking at A minor or A Aeolian. And And we're comparing that to A Dorian and A Phrygian, right? And so we just kind of go from A minor. That's kind of our pinnacle at this point. And we say, okay, well, we need to raise the sixth. Okay, fair enough. I like that, right? A is our first, B is our second, C is our third, D is our fourth, E is our fifth. F is our sixth. And here we have the F sharp once again. From there, we can say, okay, well, what about A Phrygian? Well, we say, okay, the second has to be flattened. Fair enough. A is the first, B is the second, and therefore we have to flatten it. And that's where we come in with our B flat. And now that we can kind of see that, understanding the questions that really got us here, then we can say, okay, well, now I understand that this is Dorian and this is Phrygian, right? We can kind of look at it, understanding the initial question that got us here, right? So that's, that's one of the things I just wanted to point out in the supplemental. The other thing I want to point out in the supplemental, and I don't know why new students do this, in spite of the fact that I was one of these students that did this. This was, by the way, this is exactly what I did. So I'm looking at this, and I'm looking down at the 6 o'clock, right? The G flat or the F sharp. And I would get an example and kind of talk about it. The immediate thing I would do was jump down to the 6 o'clock position. Don't do that. Don't jump down to the 6 o'clock position to try to learn this stuff. At the 6 o'clock position, you really fundamentally have to understand the circle of fifths. And I've put out a video that does dive into the expansion down here to understand it better. But, oftentimes students think that there's some magic down here at the 6 o'clock position. There's not. You down here at the 6 o'clock position, you're applying the exact same principles that you did at the 12 o'clock position for C major, or the 3 o'clock position for A major, or the 9 o'clock position for E flat major. Like, there's nothing magical down here at the 6 o'clock position other than you've really got to 90% of the time really write this out on paper. That's fine. But musically, you're kind of breaching in a territory of like 5% of music. And it's not like the one-hit wonders or the biggest, musical pieces on the planet happen down here at the 6 o'clock. They don't. It's not at all. I would say, I don't know, and this is anecdotal, 80% of the most popular music ever written on the planet falls between B flat major and D major. And if somebody wants to, argue that, I'll probably agree with you, but then generally speaking, there's nothing magical down here at the 6 o'clock. So as you're learning this stuff, don't make it more difficult on yourself by doing the very next example at the 6 o'clock. There's nothing magical down there. You really have to understand what's going on. There's a lot of, additional headache down here. Understand the upper portion, and it will behoove you. I think it will serve you very well. But with that being said, right, again, how did I come up with how does Lydian and Mixolydian or Dorian and Phrygian, how do they relate to the circle of fifths? It was kind of that initial question. Let me take a key, let me look at its neighbors, and let me determine what the differences are in the scale degrees, right? I'm not worried about chords right now because I can construct chords very easily from scales. But I would just want to look at the degrees in the scale. And that realistically, when we're talking about modes, that's what we're looking at, is subtle nuanced differences between the degrees in the scale, right? So I just wanted to put that out because I understand that there's a little bit of confusion out there about understanding some of the kind of relationship that I was looking at in the first video, and that that was my fault for not really, I guess, emphasizing what my thought process was coming from the scales into the circle of fifths. So I apologize about that, but I hope that this video kind of qualified some of the ideas. Yeah, as you're learning this, it's going to take a little bit of writing down on a piece of paper to really kind of fundamentally do it. But the best learning experience is to go to your fretboard and try it out. Again, remember, nobody's ever going to hear it. Unless you release it, nobody's going to hear it. So if you sound bad, who cares? You're learning. Go give it a shot. See, just put it on the fretboard and start strumming away random chords. Yeah, you'll mess some stuff up. Who cares? You're learning. More power to you. So with that being said, again, as always, if you're getting something out of these videos, please let me know. A thumbs up is always a huge appreciation. Comment. I love replying to everyone that puts something out on the channel. So feel free. And again, it's free. YouTube doesn't charge you anything. Huge help to the channel. That subscribe, right? If you haven't done so already, pound that subscribe, get notified of the next video that's coming out. But with that being said, I will continue with this week's lesson, which is going to have a lot more audio in it, and that'll come out a little bit later this weekend. So until then, we will talk with everybody later. Take care, everybody.